Hi, I'm Pat Kiernan. This is Pat's Papers. Thanks for joining us this morning. We go through the newspaper headlines from across the country and thin them out to point you in the direction of what we find is most interesting and most relevant. Here's some of what we found today. President Obama chose Denver for the ceremony to sign the $787 billion economic stimulus bill. The front page story in the Denver Post notes Obama called the bill the most sweeping economic recovery package in our history. The Rocky Mountain News localized the story, saying the event at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science underscored Colorado's burgeoning presence on the national political stage. The paper says this was a chance to highlight the state's green energy efforts. Clearly a busy time for the president. The numbers vary from one paper to the next, but his administration has been asked for another pile of cash for the automakers, $16.6 billion for GM, according to the Wall Street Journal's main story. The Detroit News notes that Chevy, Cadillac, GMC, and Buick will become the main brands for GM. Saturn and Hummer may be sold. If they can't be sold, they'll probably be shut down. The Detroit Free Press adds up the total auto bailout to $39 billion. Free columnist Tom Walsh says he's reminded of the old Temptations lyric about a snowball that grows. To the Washington Post, page one coverage of the stimulus bill signing and about the first deployment order by President Obama. He will send an additional 17,000 troops to Afghanistan. The order increases U.S. presence by 50%. Also in the Post this morning, a few months after the election. What's Sarah Palin up to? The Alaska governor's approval rating is still up at around 60% in her home state. But the story says there has been an unease in Alaska politics since Palin returned from her vice presidential run. One factor, the story says, is that there's a growing suspicion among other Alaska politicians that her national political ambitions will override her concern about Alaska's economy. And one more item from the Post. It looks a bit like an organization chart for some sort of corporate restructuring, but the paper publishes a guide to mixing and matching 12 types of pasta with 6 simple sauces. The result, says author Domenica Marchetti, is a nice dish of pasta that can be prepared in less than half an hour. An interesting strategy to fight off foreclosure, as described in an Associated Press story picked up in the Daily News Record of Virginia. Mortgages were repackaged and sold so often in the past decade that many banks have lost the paperwork. So if you're facing foreclosure, the story suggests you make this simple request that you want to see the original documents so you can be sure the loan belongs to the bank that's trying to collect. Sometimes that can put off the bank for months. It's not quite up to Madoff proportions, but there is another huge investment fraud story emerging, this one from Texas. The Houston Chronicle headline is SEC accuses Texan of shocking scam. Houston money manager Robert Allen Stanford's accused of a fraud that could add up to $8 billion in investor money. Japan's finance minister has called it quits. Shoichi Nakagawa became a YouTube sensation this week after he appeared to be drunk at the G7 meetings in Rome. He blames his behavior on a combination of cold medicine and jet lag. The French Caribbean island of Guadeloupe is in turmoil. The Miami Herald reports riots have broken out throughout the island. Residents are seeking higher wages and lower prices on consumer goods. The Wall Street Journal has new information today about the Continental Connection plane crash near Buffalo last week. The flight data is now indicating the pilot didn't follow procedures he should have on landing, and he may have caused the plane to stall. The first theories had been that there was ice on the wings, and that was a problem. In the New York Daily News, yesterday's front page story was the chimpanzee attack in Connecticut. A follow-up story today with the release of the 911 tape. It is a disturbing call. You hear the violent chimp in the background. The animal's owner asked police to come and shoot the chimp. The Daily News has put the audio from the 911 call on its website. To Chicago, Senator Roland Burris keeps digging himself a bigger political hole with the ever-evolving story about the degree to which he was in contact with Rod Blagojevich and his aides prior to his Senate appointment. The Sun-Times has coverage of the Senate ethics inquiry. The Chicago Tribune says no inquiry needed. Burris should just quit now, according to an editorial. A big story in a lot of papers today, the PR debacle by Facebook. The San Jose Mercury News reports on the new Terms of Service agreement, which sparked massive online protests. The new policy appears to give Facebook the legal right to go on using your pictures, messages, and notes even after you quit and delete your profile. Also with the online world, the pick of the Twitter, a story in the New York Post, which looks at celebrities on Twitter. Do they really update their status, or do they just sign up and forget about it? Tina Fey is on, but tweets rarely. Lance Armstrong and MC Hammer are highlighted because they're good for about 10 tweets a day. Former Grey's Anatomy actor Isaiah Washington's been granted dual citizenship in Sierra Leone. What's interesting is the way it happened. He took a DNA test, which verified that his ancestors came from the West African country. Airport metal detectors could be a thing of the past. According to USA Today, an experimental program begins today at Tulsa's airport. The technology that will be used in place of metal detectors is the body scanner that's capable of finding non-metallic weapons. A spokesman for the Civil Liberties Union says, "We are closer and closer to a required strip search to board an airplane." I don't really need to do anything more than read the opening line of this story about a man from the Buffalo, New York area. The New York Times says, "A man who founded a television station to help fight Muslim stereotypes is set to appear in court on charges he decapitated his wife last week." One more story from the New York Times to finish up. Is this a technological breakthrough, or is it a sign of the end for Starbucks? The company claims it has developed an instant coffee that is actually worthy of the Starbucks name. It's called Via Ready Brew. It'll be tested in Chicago and Seattle starting in March. Starbucks is also adding value meals. This move comes from Starbucks boss Howard Schultz, who once wrote, "Nothing pains me more than hearing critics compare Starbucks to fast food operation." And that's a look at just some of what's in the newspapers this morning. We try to pick the highlights for you each day, but if you think there's a particular story we should have included, send us a comment. You can do that at patspapers.com, and there you will find links to the individual newspaper websites where you can read these stories in their entirety.